I'm Candace Smith, Associate Vice Chancellor for Strategic Communications here at CU Boulder, and I'll be moderating today's call. But first, some quick housekeeping tips. Throughout today's Sustainability Forum, we will be sharing informative links with you via the chat function at the bottom of your screen, so please be on the lookout for those. The focus of today's Sustainability Forum will be to provide an overview of the new Campus Sustainability Executive Council structure, as well as a brief overview of the Climate Action Plan. Our panelists will also take your questions. Attendees are also encouraged to attend deeper dive sessions on the Climate Action Plan next week. There will be an in-person presentation on Tuesday, January 30th, and a virtual session on Wednesday, January 31st, as the CAP Steering Committee prepares to release a draft report for open comment in early February. If you have questions for the panelists in today's webinar, please use that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit a question. You can start doing that now. We also have received lots of questions in advance, and we're going to go through as many questions as we can today. If by chance we run out of questions, then we're going to end early. Presenting today, we have COO Pat O'Rourke, Vice Chancellor for Infrastructure and Sustainability, Chris Ewing, and Chief Sustainability Officer, Heidi Van Genderen. We also have other key leaders who are involved in the work of the Executive Council and the CAP Steering Committee who may be called on to answer questions. I'll now turn it over to COO Pat O'Rourke.
Oh, thanks, Candace, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for attending today. This is an important conversation for our campus, and it's going to be one of many conversations that we need to have in the days, weeks, and months to come about CU's role in sustainability and climate. I'm going to share my screen to share some information with you. So hang on while I get that started. Okay, so Candace, could you confirm for me that the slides are showing?
Yes, they're showing.
Okay, so I want to start by framing our conversation for today because we know several things about sustainability here on the Boulder campus. We're really fortunate to have students, faculty, and staff who care deeply about climate and the need for us to take actions that will preserve the future of the planet. On campus, we're just a very small part of global climate impact, but we can help model the actions that will promote both sustainability and resiliency. As an institution of higher education, our mission is founded on teaching and research. Our faculty are building climate responsibility and knowledge into the curriculum, and we're fortunate also to have world-class scientists who advance our knowledge of the environment, the harms that we as humans have made on the climate, and the means by which we can mitigate those harms. But we also recognize that as a campus, we have operations that impact the environment, and we must do more if we're going to be leaders in climate discussions. Those operations include important functions like how we heat and power our buildings, transport members of our community, and ensure the continuity of our research. And the focus of today is going to be grounded on what we collectively do on the campus. So as we do that, I want to first speak to you about a new structure that we're standing up on campus. It's called the Campus Sustainability Executive Council. And to really put it in context as to how we came to form that group, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we got here, which is that CU Boulder released its first climate action plan in 2009 with a call to reduce emissions by 2005 emissions as a baseline by 20% by 2020. And we were only able to reduce scope 1 and 2 emissions by 15% in that time frame. Our estimated carbon emissions plateaued in 2009 to where we are today. We need to get to net zero. And so in 2021, the Chancellor put forth a call for climate action. And that charge and commitment, among other things, said first, we have to have a path to carbon neutrality by no later than 2050, that we need to do gap analysis so that we can move from STARS Gold to STARS Platinum, that we needed to continue advance campus as a living learning laboratory for sustainability and resiliency, and that we need to have action and accountability. And that's where this council comes in. So earlier this year, actually, I'm forgetting, we are now in 2024, late last year, Chancellor DeStefano charged me with forming a council of leaders who are accountable for campus sustainability actions, progress, and needs related to the Chancellor's call for climate action and the responsibility for administering the upcoming climate action plan. And it's really important for me to distinguish between what this group is and what it's not. This is a group that will be looking at how we can better work on campus operations to reach our climate goals. It's not a group that's reaching teaching, curriculum, research. It's also not intended to supplant the work of other groups like the Sustainability Council, which makes recommendations to leadership about sustainability practices, or the E-Center, which serves as a vital connection point for our campus on issues including things like zero waste, water conservation, climate and social justice, and sustainability training and educational events. Our goals for this executive council is first and foremost to deliver on a campus roadmap and milestones towards carbon neutrality. Second, to align campus priorities to achieve STARS Platinum within 2 reporting cycles. That would be in about 2027. To convene biannual update forums on campus actions, gaps, and needs. To support fundraising efforts to enable sustained investment in climate action, and to identify and prioritize sustainability actions that support related campus priorities such as student success, DEI, health and wellness, and employee engagement, because this is something that affects the entire campus, not just portions of it. The structure of the council is shaped around the STARS reporting framework. So first, for planning and administration, we're going to have an executive council. I'm going to be part of that, along with folks like Heidi Van Genderen, our Chief Sustainability Officer, Shelley Miller, who is Chair of the Boulder Faculty Assembly, Josh Radoff, who's a member of the Sustainability Council and the leader of the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Specialization within the Masters of the Environment program, Dr. Deandra Mull, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Katie Kolarczyk, who is the Vice Chancellor for Advancement, Massimo Rossini, the Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Ann Schmiesing, the Vice Chancellor for Academic Resource Management, Kirsten Schuckman, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Public Policy, Chris Ewing, the Vice Chancellor for Infrastructure and Sustainability, Todd Haggerty, our campus CFO, John Leslie is our Chief Communications Officer, and Kim Kruchin, our Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives, to help us focus and have clear project planning. Together, we want to bring together people who have operational responsibility and authority to help make our campus operations work towards our goals of achieving carbon neutrality. Below that, we're going to have an operations working group that's going to prioritize operational effectiveness. That's going to have folks from infrastructure and sustainability, budget planning and finance, the E-Center, student affairs. They'll be working on the implementation of the climate action plan once we have that finalized, looking for efficiencies and ensuring that we're having metrics and reporting well. We're going to have a campus engagement working group that includes strategic relations, infrastructure and sustainability, the Office of Government and Community Engagement, advancement, and other shared governance representatives, so that we can make sure we're engaging our entire community, communicating, doing outreach, and providing education and policy that will help support the campus. We'll be tapping into our academic function to share information with academic affairs and research in the innovation office, and to ensure that we get our STARS reporting needs met. And then we'll be working with an innovation and leadership structure to engage campus administrative stakeholders to ensure that our reporting needs are met. Ultimately, we also want to get advisory groups, including the Sustainability Council, which is a cross-campus group of students, faculty, and staff that we established in 2021 to make recommendations regarding policies, programs, initiatives, investments, and other work that will sustain us in our efforts and will help inform the work in a complementary fashion with the work of this executive council. The Sustainability Council has already put forth recommendations that the Executive Council will evaluate in the weeks to come. So that's the new structure that we're standing up so that we can hopefully have our operations work to build a stronger sustainability operational culture for us on campus and move towards climate neutrality as quickly as we can. One of the projects that the council is discussing, both amongst ourselves and with other campus constituents, is called the West District Energy Plant. And I recognize that there have been questions about some upgrades to that plant that have recently been approved by the regions. And I want to put that project in a little bit of context and tell you about some work to come. When you think about a university campus, it's a really complicated place. If you look at the population that CU Boulder serves, it's around the size of many medium-sized cities in Colorado, like Grand Junction or Parker. And one of our obligations to the campus is to make sure that we have the ability to meet our community's needs, such as ensuring that $1 million worth of vital research is protected, over 10,000 on-campus beds are kept warm, that our dining halls continue to operate, that our classrooms are usable, and that our campus can serve as a shelter for students living off campus or for others in the community in time of crisis. And one of the ways that we've met that need for a long time is through the West District Energy Plant. That plant currently provides heating and cooling capacity to a large portion of main campus in tandem with our East District Energy Plant. And if you look at the slide, you'll see that the West District Energy Plant has been in existence for more than 100 years. Back in 1909, it was coal-fired, and you can see the great big smokestack that used to tower over most of the other buildings on campus. But decades ago, we stopped using coal to provide power to the campus, and that facility is now powered by natural gas. The West District Energy Plant also exclusively provides backup power to the main and east campuses that give us resilience if the other power to the campus goes down through Excel, which enables us to protect research that is sensitive and requires ongoing capacity, ensure for life safety, and allow for continuity of operations in the event the electrical grid has a challenge. Additionally, even though the campus normally relies upon Xcel Energy as our primary source of electricity, there's multiple instances each year where the campus must generate its own electricity because of excess demand on Xcel's system, and they ask us to convert over to make sure that the city of Boulder and the campus can maintain their electricity needs. WDEP's currently powered with natural gas, and we recognize that ultimately our campus needs to transition away from fossil fuels. And so if that's the case, why did the campus seek the region's approval to continue to invest in the fossil fuel solution and an upgrade at the WDEP? Last year, Colorado changed some of its air pollutant emission standards for stationary facilities like the WDEP to limit air pollution emissions such as nitrogen oxide. The project is intended to allow us to meet our air pollution emission permits capacity regulations, and that we would violate them if we operated at that capacity and didn't upgrade the facilities. In addition, we want to make sure that the WDEP project allows us to produce adequate steam to meet the campus heating needs, to preserve the capacity to generate our own power for campus resilience. And ultimately, we can look at this, that the project was designed to allow us to make sure that the health and life safety needs of the campus communities are met. We know that as we proceed forward, that the upgrades that are planned would reduce the nitrous oxide emissions by over 50% against our current operations. But as you're going to hear more later, the full transition to clean thermal energy is an intricate one that will entail converting and retrofitting approximately 180 campus buildings, replacing steam piping, heating coils, and other equipment that's internal to the buildings, all of which is going to take time, and that we're going to have the need to install new capacity in our East District Energy Plant. Those upgrades are going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and those are transitions that we must plan for and finance over an extended period of time, and make sure that we have existing technologies that allow us to make sure the campus remain operational. But I do recognize that there are members of our faculty and others who have raised really important questions about whether this is the right investment at the right time for the campus, and whether there's alternatives that we didn't fully explore. And we owe it to our community to engage those questions. So I've asked Professor Shelley Miller, who I mentioned earlier, as both the head of the Boulder Faculty Assembly and as an environmental engineer who's truly committed to climate action, to help guide those conversations in the weeks ahead. Future campus conversations with faculty, staff, and students on other important decisions related to climate action would ideally follow a structure relying on shared governance. And the reason we need to have conversations like the ones we're having today, like the ones we're going to have about the climate action plan in the months ahead, and like we'll have in the years to come as we progress towards a more sustainable future for our campus and our planet, is because this is something that is not one person's responsibility. It's a journey that we have to take together, because what we do will impact us and those who inherit the campus in the decades to come. But I don't want people to think that, well, the cap is being finalized and as we're having those discussions, that we're not moving forward. And some of the pictures that I'm demonstrating now show some of the work that we were already engaged in, such as increasing our amount of on-site solar, electrifying our fleet, and making upgrades to buildings and facilities. So we're not waiting on the climate action plan to take action. What you're going to see are some things happening on campus starting very soon. First, we're excited about more on-site solar. In the summer of 2024, once we take it to the regions for approval, we want to begin installation of a 1.1 megawatt array of solar on the East Campus. That will be completed hopefully by 2025, and that represents a $7 million investment in non-carbon-based form of electric power for the campus. We also are entering a net metering agreement for an additional 5.9 megawatts of solar. That would account for nearly 50% of our average daytime power demand, which ranges in the area of 12 to 15 megawatts, and more than triples our solar capacity, both on-site and off. So we hope to finalize that agreement this spring and to complete the installation of that net metering by 2025 as well. We're going to be starting our campus decarbonization plan in spring of 2024. We're going to begin the next phase of design. We've just recently submitted for 2 geothermal grants to explore how we might be able to use geothermal as an alternative power source. The cost of those would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $1 million for our cost sharing portion of the grants. But this is really exciting because if we learn that we can use geothermal as an alternative power source, that would be a means by which we could move more quickly towards carbon neutrality and move away from fossil fuels. From an energy efficiency standpoint, this spring, we're going to begin energy efficiency projects on 18 buildings. Those include things like upgrading windows, upgrading lighting. That's an investment the campus is making at about $5 million worth of cost. But we're actually going to see those costs come back to us in the savings as we make our buildings more energy efficient. And then lastly, we're going to be working on projects like the Williams Village conversion, which is a big deal. As I described earlier, ultimately, we're going to have to move away from steam to low temperature hot water as part of our journey towards carbon neutrality. And Williams Village is the first phase of that. So we're starting construction this spring and hope to complete that first phase in early 2025. We've also recently electrified our fleet. And so now we have 4 electric buses that are online. And we also were recently awarded a grant from the state's Clean Fleet Enterprise for 2 additional buses. Those buses should be here by early 2025. So we're continuing to explore the additional grant opportunities to add more electric buses into the fleet in the future. As we move forward, we're going to be clear with you where we're making our progress. We're going to be putting together dashboards and reports that highlight our progress on the climate action plan and our efforts to get towards carbon neutrality. And we welcome all of your input. So in the days and weeks ahead, we're going to be convening conversations. First, the executive council that I mentioned earlier is going to be doing work at the Campus Sustainability Summit. We're also committed to biannual sustainability forums. We're going to be working with our shared governance representatives in order to make sure that we know what your comments and questions and concerns are. That's a mechanism for us to be able to have those conversations. Importantly, as Candace mentioned earlier, there's going to be deep dive sessions in January next week on the 30th and 31st to start exploring the CAP. And we're going to open up a comment period for the climate action plan on February 5th. And we want that to be a really robust effort because your input and feedback matters. So knowing that that climate action plan is the next thing on our horizon, I want to turn it over to Chris Ewing and Heidi Van Genderen to provide a brief overview of the Climate Action Plan in anticipation of next week's forums. I appreciate all of your willingness to engage with us today. And Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. And while the slides are coming up, I will just thank everybody for joining us today. I'll give a high level bit of background on the Climate Action Plan, where it originated from. Before we get into that, just want to thank the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee, who have put an enormous amount of effort into drafting this document over the past year, 18 months, and the campus stakeholders who have been involved throughout the process. So a big thank you to those who have been part of the Climate Action Plan to date. Also, as Pat just mentioned, please do participate in the Climate Action Plan town halls next week and the public comment period when it opens on February 5th. With that, I'm going to hand it over here to Heidi shortly, but just wanted to mention that previous efforts built up to the Climate Action Plan, primarily the Energy Master Plan, the Campus Master Plan, those fed into our Climate Action Plan framework. We kicked off the effort a little over a year ago in 2022. We had our first major, we had met with key stakeholders the fall towards the end of 2022. We had our first campus town hall at the Sustainability Summit in April of last year. The initial draft was released to CAP Steering Committee members through the fall. There was a lot of fine tuning that happened in review and moving that forward. We began to share with some campus leadership and shared governance towards the end of the year, and we are where we are now, which is the Climate Action Plan draft is nearing completion. We will be having those town halls next week, and we will have the draft out available for public comment February 5th. We will be looking to release, our target date is to release it in April. And so with that, I will turn it over to Heidi, who will take over the presentation.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I'd add my thanks to everybody who's on the webinar today, and also redouble the thanks to the CAP Steering Committee of students, faculty, and staff that have been so hard at work at this for a while. Pat took you through a little bit of the history. In 2007, the gentleman named Tony Cortese decided that he should organize a bunch of college and university presidents to come forward with a public climate commitment. So the American College and University Climate Commitment was born, and in 2007, CU Boulder Chancellor, then Chancellor Bud Peterson, signed that commitment that actually committed the campus to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 20% by 2020, 50% by 2030, and 80% by 2050. In the call to climate action that Pat referenced, issued by our chancellor in April of 2021, he increased, in recognition of the climate imperative, he increased that 80% by 2050 to zero emissions by no later than 2050. The conceptual plan for carbon neutrality Pat also referenced was led by our own Dave Newport. It was an internal effort and a lot of great content in it, but the folks who were involved in it will also admit that it was not completely implemented. So we are a campus that does plans well. The trick with a good plan is it definitely needs then to be implemented. So that is what we have been about since a year ago, October. And the link there is for all of you to go to see precisely who's on the steering committee. Next slide, please. The Climate Action Plan started by discussion among the steering committee to identify specific principles upon which we would do this. We first of all are doing this under the architecture of the Science-Based Targets Initiative. That architecture did not exist in 2009 and provides a very ample guardrail for what it is we're aiming to do here. This CAP also distinguishes itself by looking at co-benefits critically important to look at not only community human health, ecological health, but very importantly to look at the notion of equity and social justice. The Environmental Center again had started efforts to create a climate justice action plan. We in infrastructure and sustainability were on our way to do the climate action plan update. We extended our hand and said, what do you say, let's join forces so that we have one climate action plan that will be distinguished, I believe, among colleges and universities in its address of equity and social justice. Last but not least, as we continue to withstand additional, more ferocious weather events, resilience becomes a very important consideration in the prioritization of the investments that we seek to make. This campus is a way station for times of trouble in the community of Boulder. The 2013 flood was some evidence of that, but we're expecting this to happen more, and we need to be a place where people can seek safe shelter, be fed, remain warm. Importantly, we are also going to accomplish these goals without the use of offsets, so purchasing carbon offsets and or renewable energy credits. Other campuses that have achieved carbon neutrality or zero emissions, most of those, I would say, have done so through some purchase of offsets. We ourselves have purchased offsets in years past, but for the meeting of the Climate Action Plan goals, we're saying we've got to do it in real time. Whoa, and just two other quick principles, and that is that all investments need to be cost effective. We've had the CFO's office very much at the table on the steering committee, and the partnership with Xcel Energy as our chosen and only investor-owned utility for which we are large customers, very important as well. Onward. Thank you, Stace. Quick primer for those of you who don't operate in this world. There are 3 scopes of emissions in the greenhouse gas emission world. Many of you on the call will know this, but just to review quickly, scope 1 are those emissions that are resulting directly from that West District energy plant as one example. Scope 2 are the purchased energy emissions that we get. So there's Xcel Energy. The good news there is Xcel is really advancing the cleanup of its own grid, which is an important ingredient for us. For the first time in 2009, Scope 3 was not included in the Climate Action Plan. We are including it under the Science Based Targets Initiative. There are 15 categories, and we have a slide a little further down to show you those. Those are the indirect emissions. For example, our campus spends $1.2 billion a year in purchasing goods and services through the Procurement Services Center. How do you work with your supply chain so that you get the lowest carbon options in all that you are purchasing? Next slide, please. So we have organized the Climate Action Plan through those scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Where do we start? Let's find out where our emissions are today. So we contracted this time around with Blue Stripe Consultants. They've been a great partner in this, and the emissions inventory will show you, and the world's getting a little surprised on this front. Scopes 1 and 2 have actually come down, again, because of efforts like Xcel Energy in cleaning its own grid. Scope 3 emissions are coming forward, and you'll see here that they represent 54.8% of our campus emissions. So critically important that we get after those emissions, and you'll see on the left side of that slide an example of 9 of the 15 categories that are in the Scope 3 emissions. Happy to respond to any questions, and these slides will be made available. Next slide, please. So the core goals for the Climate Action Plan, again, go back to those 2007 commitments that we want to achieve 50% reduction in scopes 1 and 2 by 2030, which is no small lift. Again, as noted by Pat, we missed the 2020 goal of 20% by actually 14.4%, 15.4%. We missed it by 4.6%. There we are. So that 50% reduction by 2030 is not a small lift. It will absolutely be the glide path for us to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Importantly, you don't go from 50% 2030 to zero emissions without doing a linear reduction, absolutely starting now from in our ability to achieve this. So, and again, do so without the purchase of offsets or RECs. Same thing for scope 3. We hope to, for those categories that we have direct control over, achieve a 50% reduction by 2030 and reduce those further by 2050. I'm going to predict that scope 3 is not going to be as clearly a linear reduction as scopes 1 and 2. But again, please remember the linear reduction. Again, recognition of those co-benefits. What decisions are we making in priority fashion that have good effects in the equity and social justice realm that also clearly point to greater health? When you reduce air pollution, good for all living things on the planet. And again, what's it doing to back up resilience? We address a strong governance structure and the transparency that will bring forward implementation of this plan. And we also will work with our partners like Lori Call in government affairs and community engagement to continue to have a strong link with the community. The city of Boulder is facing the same challenges we are. They've missed their greenhouse gas emission goals of late. And absolutely, as one of the largest entities in the city, it's important that we work with a lot of partners, public sector, private sector, and civil society on mutual implementation of our respective goals. Next slide, please. Dr. Karen Bailey headed up our Equity and Social Justice Working Group. She is on the call today and available during Q&A. Most grateful to Karen. She's an associate professor in the Environmental Studies Department. If you don't know her, you should. These are 2 slides on what equity in the CAP means. So historically, we have a lot of the decisions have been made, in fact, most adversely affect disadvantaged communities. There are a multitude of examples near our campus, up north of Denver for sure. We are trying to create a climate action plan that is committed to knowing those inequities and to seeing what we can do to mitigate them. Next slide, please. The primary outcomes are, first of all, do no greater harm, recognize diversity. Nature has diversity as one of its underpinnings. We need to do that in human organization as well. So how do we bring forward a diverse an array of voices as we can? The land acknowledgement is one example right now of our efforts and awareness to address historic inequities and to be honest about what we've done and to commit to not doing that further. We also recognize that this is primarily an operations plan. There is a lot going on in the equity and justice realm on our campus, rightly so, that will not necessarily be directly addressed in this operations plan. Next slide, please. Okay, very swiftly. The consultants did 4 scenarios on how we're going to get to our net zero goal by no later than 2050. What you see here is a graph that shows you the solid black line is business as usual. If we do nothing, we actually consolidated 2 of the scenarios that address the thermal transition that Pat O'Rourke referenced, and all of the other aspects in the built environment, the energy system, and transportation, land use, housing, food waste, all of it. And scenario 3 came out the winner. And you can see from the graph, the reason why is because it's our most assured path to meeting these goals. Again, these will be available post this presentation. Next slide, please. These are some of the measures, and just wanted to give you a sense of, again, the cost of each of these recommended actions is a very salient challenge for the campus. There's a lot of money in the world, but the fact of the matter is we're going to have to go find a good portion of it to be able to pull all that is recommended in this plan off. We think the appetite is there. There are historic amounts of public funding available right now. This gives you some sense, and the numbers in red are interesting because if you calculate again in the equity realm, the social cost of carbon, you can actually get to a net cost number in certain of the investments. So again, how do we help campus leadership prioritize the investments? How do we help the Board of Regents do that? Here's how we're going to have clear costs and the benefits, as you can see in the key. Next slide, please. These are the 15 scope 3 categories, and the NAs will show you that there are 5 categories that we simply are not, they're not relevant to our campus. So again, when you have a chance to review the climate action plan draft, have at it in terms of the opportunities. You'll see that category 15, sorry, is divestment investment. There's been a lot of conversation of late over the last couple of years, thanks to student groups here on campus. The fact of the matter is the University of Colorado Boulder does not have direct authority over that. But the fact of the matter is there's also grave interest on our campus and about that issue. And it's something that we believe the CAP should not ignore entirely. And how do we take that on? Next slide, please. These are specific measures that are associated with scope 3. And just to give you a sense of what it is that we'll be working on in that realm. It's a fascinating one, and there is a question that came in before the webinar about air emissions travel. Air emissions fall into the scope 3. Chris, anything at this point that I realized I breezed right by? We had agreed that you might want to chime in after that wonderful graph, and I apologize. Anything you want to add?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. Don't hire me. So Pat covered all this, which is, we just wanted to point out that, again, we have not been sitting on our hands, and there is some, so as we create this plan, we have also been undertaking what we can to do to actually help start the implementation of it. Next slide, please. Few additional facts that also distinguish this from the last climate action plan we did. There will be a public dashboard. Pat also mentioned this in his remarks. Anybody on the campus is going to be able to go on. How do we build greater transparency and therefore collective accountability for ourselves in the actions that we seek to have successfully implemented to do our part on human address of climate change, human caused. So the dashboard's going to be there for everybody to be able to go on and see how we're doing. Importantly, this is a living document that absolutely will require continuous monitoring and course corrections in the course of its implementation. 2050 is a long way out. I'm going to say most of us on this call may not even be here to be celebrating that zero emissions. I should just speak personally. I'm hoping not to be, but I'm rooting for those who are. This needs to be absolutely monitored. The Sustainability Council, the Sustainability Advisory Council will be the front door, as noted in the governance section, as the monitoring, the overarching monitoring body for the implementation of this. They will then be working closely with the Sustainability Executive Council on the course corrections and or celebrations of milestones achieved. And again, importantly, all of you who are motivated to be on this call clearly have an interest in this. We would so appreciate and welcome your review of the draft so that we can make that document the best it can be out of the gate when it's published in April of this year. Thank you all. And I believe I should turn it back over to Candace.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists for their insights today. We're now going to open it up for questions. Just a reminder that Q&A function is at the bottom of your screen. First question is for CFO Todd Haggerty. Budgets are value statements. Would you please help us understand how the campus plans to fund these goals?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Candace. And we'll start off right with the easiest question of all. How do we find the money for this? This is one of the major objectives of the Executive Council that Pat was explaining earlier. And it's really to determine how we prioritize our resources, make some of those critical, hard decisions at times to achieve our climate goals and really accelerate the progress. And this is no small task. This is going to take a lot of effort, a lot of creative thinking, and really bringing the entire campus together to think of things differently. On the revenue side, we're going to really have to explore looking at every opportunity for federal grants, state grants, looking at state funding requests. And then go to the other parts, which is we're going to have to look at our own existing resources and see and ask ourselves some hard questions about what are we going to do differently? Can we reallocate to support these priorities? And again, this is where it takes the entire campus community to really advance where we're going to go into this space. And we're going to also have to look at leveraging our ability to issue existing debt to fund some of these projects as well. We do have some restraints and constraints that we'll have to deal with in that space, but that doesn't mean we can't explore it, and that doesn't mean we don't test it. So again, we're going to have to be looking at every single opportunity, every possibility, both externally and internally, to move this forward. And this is a puzzle, but it's actually a puzzle I am happy to be a part of trying to solve here. And we're going to find the box that shows us the picture that we're getting into on the funding side here, that we can align all these pieces together. But looking forward to doing more on it.
Thank you, Todd. Next question is for Chris. For those of us who don't have operational roles, is there a way for us to get involved?
Yes, as far as getting involved, more involved for those that are in non-operational roles, I think the most immediate is please come to the Climate Action Plan town halls next week on the 30th and 31st. Please participate. Please be part of the public comment period starting February 5th and submit your review comments there. We welcome those, and looking more long-term, I would say engaging through your shared governance with student, faculty, staff in those areas that are working to improve sustainability here on campus. I think there's also a sustainability suggestion Dropbox on the sustainability webpage. There's an active way to participate through there. And then I think lastly, through individual behavior, how we all go about our days and our lives and the choices that we make throughout the day on how we get to campus and what we eat and what we keep the thermostat on. And those are all the little things that we can all do as individuals at home or on campus as we start to look at being more efficient on campus, which may entail adjusting temperatures that we're used to being at. So I think that sums it up.
Thank you. Next question is for Brian. Are there initiatives related to how the campus is utilizing leftover compostable materials?
Thanks for that question, Candace. Campus compostable materials collected both by our in-house team and our partner through our partnership with EcoCycle. Depending upon the material type, it is taken to either A1 organics or Western disposal. Much of this material gets repurposed, processed, and is used in our local and regional communities. However, there has been some relatively recent changes with A1 organics not accepting compostable plastics and paper products, which has left a little bit of a gap in what we're able to collect and process. So we do have teams both with our in-house solid waste recycling team as well as the E-Center, working with our local and regional partners trying to solve those issues. Not quite there yet, but we know we have a lot of folks trying to work on it. But it unfortunately is those gaps are the result of a regional challenge with A1 organics really not being able to accept those plastics and paper products.
Thank you. Don't go away, Brian. This one is for you or Heidi. In light of the recent compost and plastic issues, how are the zero waste goals being featured in campus plans? And then can you also talk about efforts to restore the public-facing compost lost due to the changes at A1 Organics?
Yeah, so our current goals, we have very ambitious zero waste goals as defined. We would like to achieve a 90% diversion rate of all landfill waste by 2025. We do have our Zero Waste Board of Directors is currently looking at a campus-wide waste assessment in support of really re-looking at that goal and the potential updates and revisions of that goal. It's going to be a challenge to hit that 90%. We're currently in the realm of around 50% diversion rate, which is far from our goal, but in relative terms to how the state's diversion rate is and national averages, we're well above those percentages. So we've got a lot of work to do on achieving that goal. It's going to take a full effort of not just looking at our waste and what we produce, but what we buy and how we buy it and how it's purchased and packaged as well. So those are all things we have multiple stakeholders and teams working towards improving upon. As far as the A1 organics issue, like I said, that's a state challenge that many partners are working to achieve. We've had lots of dialogue with the city, the county, our partner EcoCycle, looking for opportunities to improve upon that. Unfortunately, it's a challenge for A1 organics. They were just getting too many contaminants, which was impacting the quality of the compostable material they were producing. And it's something that's going to take a village really to work through and try to improve upon.
Thank you. Here's another question for our CAP leaders, Heidi, Brian, or Shelley. How is CU working to reduce aviation admissions among students, faculty, staff?
I think I'll jump in there briefly to share with you that our Climate Science and Education Committee and the Boulder Faculty Assembly has been really looking at how we can support our faculty and students and staff in understanding these emissions and what options we have available. We really are just getting started in trying to provide resources for addressing these emissions. The Scope 3 emissions are huge, and we need our campus to work together and to be committed to trying to figure out how to reduce these emissions. And so our Climate Science and Education Committee are here to support that. I also wanted to make a comment on the recycling. The paper and the plastics that are recyclable, compostable, are often contaminated with toxic chemicals. And so it's hard to tell which compostable product has the chemical and which doesn't. I'm happy to discuss this further from an environmental engineering perspective, but I think that's part of the issue with this composting problem that we're trying to address.
Thank you for that, Shelley. Next question is for Chris. We need to build for the 22nd century. What is the plan for living buildings and LEED Platinum buildings? What about fires and floods?
Thank you, Candace. We have made large advancements in our building standards, and just in the last 2 years, as far as how we design, how we build our buildings. And going back to the LEED Platinum question, we have a number of LEED Platinum buildings on campus. We are required to meet LEED Gold. We like to make sure that when we are investing and we are making decisions on whether to pursue platinum or not, that there's a large value to the campus there. And so that means sometimes we don't go all the way to platinum because the value was not there, and we were better off to redirect those dollars that would have gone to making that building platinum to some other cause, for example, making some of our older buildings more efficient. But with that said, new designs that we are working on as we speak, that I can say that are big changes from how we used to do our building designs. Efficiency and how those buildings will operate. So that's gauged off of an energy use intensity, or EUI. That will, I'll use Helms, for example, which is under renovation. Before the renovation, Helms had an EUI of 109. That is a very inefficient building. It's because these buildings are old, and we build them much more efficient today than we did 100 years ago when Helms was built. The renovated Helm's EUI will be under 50. That's incredible, the amount of reduction in energy use for a building like Helm. So we're really looking at efficiency. It goes in line with the thinking that, you know, the more efficient we are, the less energy we need. And then the less energy that we need, we can focus on cleaning that energy and reducing our carbon emissions through that. So other areas that we're looking at, an area that's in the scope 3 is embodied carbon of our building materials, construction of new buildings. There is a building that's under design right now where we're exploring a large portion of that building being built out of mass timber. That would be a first on our campus. Very excited about that project. And DeAndre Willis, our campus architect, is really leading this charge as far as how do we look at different ways of building our buildings, making them more efficient and looking to the future. A couple other areas I'll just mention quickly. All buildings are being equipped to be heated off of all new buildings and renovations off of low temperature hot water so that they can eventually be transitioned over to an electrified heating source. They, where it makes sense, are being equipped with PVs for future solar. There is one building right now, the one that I mentioned about mass timber, that we're looking at mass timber, where we're exploring a green roof on a portion of that building. That would be a first as well. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to balancing dollars and value back to the campus. And if we come to a fork in the road and we're way better off to divert some of that funding towards making some of our older buildings more efficient or decarbonizing part of our campus, we will likely have to make that decision at that point, rather than just one specific new building.
Thank you, Chris. Next question is for Pat. Regarding the scope and ambition of the CAP, what can be done to electrify our heating faster than planned?
So thank you, Candace. I appreciate the question. And part of it is what Chris just described, which is we'll have new buildings that come online and we can look at energy solutions that relate to those buildings. As Chris described, we're going to try to expand the use of solar. As I talked a little bit about earlier, there's also the possibility that if we obtain and can pursue the geothermal grants, that could be a pathway for us to be able to transition to non-carbon based heating sources quicker. So we're exploring that. One of the challenges we have, though, is that we can't just think about new buildings and buildings one by one. We have to think about the system of interconnectedness that we have across the campus that currently relies on that steam heating system. And so we're going to have to go in phases. If we can find funding, we will accelerate where we can. And if we can identify alternative power sources that allow us to have a campus-based strategy to address buildings as a network that we have to supply for the whole campus rather than one-off projects, which won't allow us to move all the way that we need to. We'll do that as well, but I'm encouraged by the efforts that we're making to look into alternative power sources. And if the technology becomes feasible, we'll move quicker.
Thank you, Pat. And there's a follow-up question. How will the existing executive council engage with existing structures groups working on sustainability today?
Yeah, so I addressed that a little bit off the top, which is that the goal that I had was not to displace work that's currently being done elsewhere on campus. We have, through the BFA, Climate Education Committee, we have the E-Center. We know that through COSG that they're interested in sustainability work. We have the Sustainability Council. Those are all important pieces of our work. And so the Executive Council is not meant to displace that. And in fact, those are groups that we're going to have to engage with. But what I came to recognize is that we had a little bit of a disconnect, which is that people were looking at infrastructure and sustainability and saying, what are you doing to get us towards carbon neutrality? And as much as I appreciate the work that Chris and Heidi and Brian Lindorfer and others are doing there, it's really something that I had to also have other campus responsible parties at the table to help us crack this as a challenge. So we needed to have Todd Haggerty as the CFO, that they needed to have Katie Kolarczyk as the vice chancellor for advancement if we're going to be able to fundraise, and there's some significant fundraising potential. We needed to have people like Kirsten Schuchman, who works with our governmental relations team so that we can explore federal and state funding opportunities. And so what I wanted to do was to pull together people who had those type of operational responsibilities so that we can work together. And that's really the intent of this group, not to displace what we're currently doing. And in many ways, this really works like we had to work during COVID, which is rather than looking at a campus problem as being housed in particular places, we had to treat them as campus challenges. And so this group will work together and engage with the campus because we all share a common goal.
Thank you for that. This is related to what you were talking about, and for John, how does the executive council plan meaningfully integrate community members like students, the East Center staff, faculty, subject matter experts? And then there's a follow-up question. Can students be added to the executive council membership?
Thank you, Candace, and thanks everyone for your engagement today. I think kind of building on what Pat's previous answer started, the engagement working group has been deliberately constructed to incorporate the nominees of our shared governance elected leadership. So we have representation from BFA, we have staff council, we have CUSG and GPSG invited to participate directly in the work of that group. The feedback we receive and the outbound communicating we do is a model that we've started developing through some initial conversations in January. You'll start to see a regular cadence of communications, but also invitations to engagement opportunities. The CAP sessions next week being an example of that, and the public comment period being another one. We've also, I think, benefited from some really interesting opportunities. We participated with BFA's climate subcommittee and a brainstorm about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago. I think there'll be more opportunities that we can surface with those shared governance partners as far as how we can increase the meaningfulness, transparency, and real practical orientation of how we're communicating what's happening and where we're stuck and where we need more input. I also wanted to acknowledge we've gotten a lot of questions today. We also got a lot of questions before the session began. And I'll bring all of those questions once we get a download from our folks who organized the session today into the working group, and we'll work on following up on those and making those available to the campus and broader community. Some have easy answers and some don't. So I think we'll also continue to work on how we can engage meaningfully and make visible the feedback we're getting so that the executive council and our other structures are well informed and you all feel well engaged and that your voices are being heard relative to the work as it moves forward. Finally, I would say integrating with existing efforts like a lot of the things the East Center and other groups already have working. We're working on how to make sure we can benefit from our relationships and still be respectful of the roles we play, the agency we have, and the transparency needs that emanate from that. So that, being said, showing up at the Campus Sustainability Summit as a group in April, being accountable, having these dashboards available, and really utilizing colorado.edu/sustainability as a digital hub where all of this information can be increasingly well articulated and we can see ourselves in the work moving forward are all key things that the engagement group is going to be working on. So thanks for the question.
Okay, and with that, we're actually at time. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to remind everyone that the CAP Steering Committee will be hosting 2 deep dives next week. January 30th in person from 10 to 11:15 in the UMC room 235, and January 31st virtually. There should be a link in the shared chat for you to view for that. We'll now end the call, and thank you for joining.